Welcome to the Plant Fit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Robert Cheeke. Robert is an author and the founder and president of Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness. He is a two-time natural bodybuilding champion and is considered one of Veg News magazine's most influential vegan athletes. We start the conversation with Robert sharing about why everyone is obsessed over the one question: where do you get your protein? Enjoy the presentation.
I wrote about it in my most recent book that comes out next year. I think what's going on with the protein thing is that there's, we started like back in the 1930s, at least in America, really revamping or not revamping, but amping up, television commercials and that kind of stuff. And factory farming was coming along. And so, meat and other animal products were advertised pretty heavily on television. It was a great way to, feed families and nourish families and use livestock, animals as that fuel source. And so it became a popular thing throughout the 1930s, 40s, 50s in the United States. And then along came Joe Weider and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, that's really when the protein powders and supplementation started coming around the 1960s, 1970s with the rise of bodybuilding. And there was this byproduct from making cheese, separating curds from whey, and whey protein isolate, whey protein was a byproduct of that. And it became a waste product that could be thrown away, or it could be packaged up and sold and eventually turn into a billion-dollar industry, because it does help build muscle, just like as it helps a baby calf turn into a cow and grow relatively rapidly. Now, it has some adverse effects, of course, insulin-like growth factor 1, and has, especially with casein protein, some cancer-causing properties and known carcinogens along with it. And so there's a risk involved. But really what I think happened was that as modern agriculture was really taking off, and especially animal agriculture, and it was seen as, protein was something that was to nourish and to build and grow. And so it was to feed families. It also became relatively masculine or macho, to whether it was to hunt or to raise your own food and slaughter your own food and feed your family and take care of your family. It was a very, very masculine thing to do. And then that carried over into, as I said, not only television, but television, TV dinners and frozen food products and microwavable products. And then it became this fast food nation that we arrived in, especially in the Western world, which now is basically all over the world. We got into this idea that food through government subsidies, especially meat and dairy and animal products, could be subsidized pretty heavily and made really affordable, really, really cheap. And so then these foods were, these restaurants popped up like crazy. And as people got busier and lives got busier with people working and children going to school and involved in other activities like sports and music and art, we needed food pretty fast. And so we wanted to get as much protein as we could for as little cost as we could. And that's where things like hamburgers and cheeseburgers and pizza and things like that became a real staple in Western culture. And protein was always at the center of it. We never talked about making sure we reach our carbohydrate threshold for the day, or make sure we get those fats in, make sure you eat as much butter as possible and really drink oil from the bottle. That was never really the idea. It was always get protein in the center of the plate and then add anything else around it: carbohydrates, fats, foods with fiber in them, or maybe some salad greens that have vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and those kind of things, but really make protein the center. And so that's just been part of our culture. It's been part of our society. And so naturally, it's going to carry over into sports. And like I said, the sports supplement industry and the sports industry at large, eating animals, using animals as sports supplements to add even more protein to the diet, suggesting that it does the body good, we'll get bigger and stronger. Those are all things that perpetuated into this culture, into this understanding that more protein is better and we should seek it out as often as possible. And so here we are today. Here we are today with a protein-addicted nation. And there's even protein water, there's protein popcorn, there's protein, any food basically you can imagine. It's slapped on there for marketing purposes because you can sell more of it if it says it has protein on it. I mean, you've seen it. There's protein soy milk, protein almond milk. I mean, there's protein added to all these non-dairy beverages, protein added to all kinds of other beverages. And so here we are, and now we have this problem of, we have a culture and society that is overeating but undernourished. So we eat more calories than we need, yet we're undernourished because we're eating the wrong calories. And so now we're in this situation where most people are classified as overweight. A huge percentage are also obese. Many people, I mean, as many as something like 1 in 2 now have type 1, sorry, not type 1, they have type 2 diabetes. They have, something like a 1 in 2 chance at cancer right now, something like 1 in 2 in heart disease. I mean, the statistics are very staggering. You basically, anytime you go into a store, a grocery store, half the people there, or more than half, are likely to have one of the following: heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, cancer diagnosis, or will get that diagnosis at some point in their life. And so we've got a bit of a problem here. And I really think it stems back to protein and our obsession with it, which began about 100 years ago.
Being based in Singapore, especially in the fitness industry right now, there is still that emphasis on protein, and we've kind of adopted that Western mindset towards to our diet. You know, a lot of meats, whey protein, and as we know, majority of the population, and particularly Asians, are lactose intolerant. And meanwhile, I see a lot of my countrymen chugging down whey protein like there's no tomorrow. So with that in mind, you know, when you have that protein mindset, is there anything that you're missing when your focus is only protein, having that almost myopic view towards nutrition? What are you missing?
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. In fact, that's something I've written about quite a bit because I don't think it's getting talked about very much. That our focus, our emphasis on protein consumption is actually, I think, shooting ourselves in the foot, because then we deprive ourselves of the more nutrient-dense, complex carbohydrates we could be eating. The foods that have more vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fiber, water in them, the things that are most important to our vitality. And the fact that most of us eat way more protein than we need. I didn't even talk about that when I mentioned the history of the protein obsession. The fact that we want more and more and more is better, which is not true. It's the fact that if you consume adequate calories based on your true calorie needs, you will get adequate protein. In fact, you'll get probably quite a bit more than you need. We know from Dr. Campbell's research, I know he's a hero of yours, hero of mine, you know, we need only 5 to 10% of our calories coming from protein. And Luke, I can tell you, I don't know how many, I don't know what it is in kilos, but you know, I'm about 210 pounds. I was 209.4 yesterday. I've been over 200 pounds for years now. And I've been following a 10% calories coming from protein diet for about 8 years now. Not a lot of people know that, or maybe people don't believe it, or how can that possibly be? You know, you only eat 10% of your calories from protein, you weigh over 200 pounds. Well, I eat, you know, a 3,000 calorie diet, sometimes more. I've documented it for up to 6 weeks at a time in recent years, and through Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, so I know that, you know, the accuracy of it for the most part. And that's, I think the fact is there's more nutrition in complex carbohydrates that we're missing out on when we focus on protein intake, especially if we're talking about isolated protein. If we're taking too many isolated protein supplements or hot dogs or burgers or whatever these things are, where it's concentrated, isolated protein, oftentimes soy protein isolate, that doesn't have all the other things, the carbohydrates, sometimes the fats, the fiber, the water. And I think if we make a shift, and we really want to talk about athletic performance, and you want to talk about reducing inflammation, you want to talk about increasing energy, right? You want to talk about improving endurance or improving digestion. All of those things benefit typically from a higher intake of complex carbohydrates. I'm talking like all kinds of fruits and vegetables, legumes, grains, these types of things. You're going to get more diversity of nutrition. You're going to get a higher Andy score, you know, aggregate nutrient density index. Dr. Joel Furman coined that term. You know, the highest quality foods based on their aggregate nutrient density index are leafy green vegetables. And, you know, we're not eating a lot of those when we're focused on calorie rich, calorie dense, protein concentrated, focused foods, whether in the shakes, bars, burgers, hot dogs, processed foods. So that's what I think we're missing out on. I think 97% of Americans, and probably many around the world, are not consuming enough fiber. I think if we increase our vegetable and fruit intake, our complex carbohydrate intake overall, we're going to be better off for it. our bodies are 70% water, our brains even up to maybe 80% water. Our muscles, bodies, everything we're working with is 70 to 80% water. That's going to come from fruits and vegetables as well. So I say we make a shift and focus on getting 60 to 70% of our total calorie intake from carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates is key. And I think you mentioned Andy, and I know ORAC as well. I think ORAC is the measurement of antioxidants. And exactly. I wasn't actually aware of these terms until I became plant-based myself, because back in the day, and I know many fitness people tend to focus on the protein, and you don't, what's an Andy, what's an ORAC, how much protein is there? That's the number one priority. So I want to, now that you brought up carbs, the first thing that people always worry about is carbs make you fat. And I'd just like to get your take on it. People who are fitness enthusiasts watch the Game Changers and suddenly want to try this plant-based thing. But the first fear is that, oh my goodness, a plant-based diet, my goodness, to get 20 grams of carbs from 20 grams of protein from black beans, that's like, there's so much carbs in there, and they get that fear. So what would what's your take on that?
Yeah, so it's not carbs that make you fat. It's concentrated calories and inactivity and habits that make people fat. And also, I would say people aren't fat, they have fat. I think it's especially when we're talking in the first person, that's really important to distinguish that. So imagine what it does for your mindset, Luke, your psyche, your psychological way you feel about yourself when you say I am fat versus I have fat, right? When you say I am fat, you identify as being someone who's fat, overweight, obese, all these things, embarrassed, all these things could come to mind, right? But if you just acknowledge that you have fat, well, then that's something then, okay, well, we have muscle too, and we have organs, we have, blood, we have water, we have skin, we have all these different things, and recognize that. And if we want to change that level of fat that we have, the level of body fat, well, then we know how to approach that. We change our diet, we change our lifestyle, we change our habits, we change our exercise routine, and then all of a sudden we can decrease the amount of fat. But I think it starts by identifying that we're not fat, we have fat. So I think it's an important thing. So when it comes to carbohydrates, so people fear like, okay, carbohydrates are going to make me fat. That's not what's happening here, okay? It's sugars, it's fats, it's processed, refined flours, and other processed and added ingredients that add to the calorie density of a specific food. For example, people talk about donuts and stuff, right? Pastries and cakes and all this. Oh, too many carbs. Well, no, it's mostly, fat, calories in those things, and often coming from oil, which is 4,000 calories per pound, pure fat. It's that kind of stuff. It's not that it's apples that are making us fat, or romaine lettuce, or kale, or or other foods. It's that are whole food carbohydrates that still have the water and fiber intact. It's really the processed ingredients. It's the sodas, right? It's the sodas, the alcohol, the refined beverages. In fact, that's a big part of it, Luke. I would say the fact that so many people drink their calories. I'm not talking healthy green smoothie. I'm not talking one plant-based protein shake a day. I'm talking about, at least in America, unlimited sodas that are just pennies on the dollar, cheap, almost free to drink this stuff, liters at a time. Drinking hot beverages, caffeinated beverages, cold beverages, sweet beverages, desserts, sports drinks. People don't talk about that very much. Sports drinks, which have in a 28 or 32 ounce bottle, 2 to 2.5 times recommended daily added sugar intake in one bottle of an electrolyte drink that's popular in every refrigerator across the world. You know the brands I'm talking about. These are part of the problem. These carbohydrates, not whole food carbohydrates. And you mentioned something important just a moment ago too. You talked about like people associate, especially in the plant-based world, beans or legumes as a source of, good source of protein, right? They're mostly carbohydrates, right? They're huge. They're like way more carbohydrates than they are protein. It's just the fact that they have more protein than a lot of other plant-based foods. So we have to look at a food based on its macronutrient structure, the configuration of the food. You can't just say a donut or a pastry or whatever is just carbohydrates and that's going to make you fat. You've got to look at the other constituents of it. You got to look at the fat. You've got to look at the lack of water, the lack of fiber, the total calories in the size of the serving, of what the food is. It could be hundreds or 1,000 or 1,000 to 2,000 calories. Like that matters. And so what I would say is, carbohydrates are not to be feared at all. In fact, they may be the best to protect us against common degenerative diseases. It might be the best foods possible to fight against cancer and heart disease and those types of things. They're loaded with fiber, which we certainly need more of in our life. They're great for our gut microbiome. The diversity in the vitamin, mineral, antioxidant, phytonutrient complex and its cohesiveness and its holistic approach and how the body uses it and pulls on these different amino acids and reserves, that's all to be celebrated. And that's our body's preferred source of fuel, right? For exercise, for our brain to run on. We want glucose, we want carbohydrate fuel to run on. Fats are going to be our next best fuel source. And then protein is going to be our least efficient, the thing that people want to load up on and to energize themselves is actually our least efficient form of energy in protein. So carbohydrates, include them in whole food form as often as possible. And, audit yourself. Don't be afraid to document what you eat for a week or so. Find out who you are, what your habits are, what your behaviors are that you don't know about, because most of us like to kind of conveniently forget about the chocolates that we have, the alcohol that we may have, the sugary drinks, the desserts we have every single day. We forget about that kind of stuff. And we remember the time we had a salad and pat ourselves on the back. I had a salad today. It was maybe my first one since June, but I had one today and I feel good about that. So I think it's being not hard on ourselves, but honest with ourselves and being transparent about what we're eating and making sure that complex carbohydrates are the core of the diet and where most of our calories come from.
I like what you just brought up, auditing, and I think that's such a key point as well, because I remember when I was a coach and coaching my clients, and when you get your client to write the food diary and they don't want to write out certain entries because it's like, oh, I don't want to let him know I've eaten that. Right. And I think auditing is an interesting point as well, because I think in terms of people transitioning to a plant-based diet, I think that one of the factors that causes people to kind of fall off the bandwagon is maybe not consuming sufficient calories. So because plant-based calories are a lot less calorically dense than animal-based ones. So with that in mind, how can someone moving to this diet, this lifestyle, ensure that they're consuming sufficient calories?
Yeah, Luke, that's actually one of the biggest issues. And I like to talk about it. I talk about it a lot. I write about it because I've been doing this for 25 years now. And I've put on just about 100 pounds, right? 120 pounds when I became vegan at age 15 in 1995 to I was 219.2 pounds with clothes on. I was almost there, 100-pound gain. And then I've trimmed off like 10 pounds since then. It was getting a little bit too much, tight jeans. I couldn't fit in my clothes anymore. That was just a couple months ago. But I've been around this block, Luke. I know if anyone knows about building muscle and getting sufficient calories, it's me, because I've done it my entire adult life for 25 years, a quarter century, putting on plant-based muscle. So here's a key. All different classifications of food have a calorie density to them, right? So there's a calorie density scale. So leafy greens on one end are the very lowest, as low as 60 calories per pound, 60 to 100 or so. And as I mentioned, oil is on the other end at 4,000 calories per pound. And all along the way, you're going to get vegetables at 200 calories a pound, fruits at 300 calories per pound, legumes, 500 calories per pound, things like that. And you get into animal products, 1,000, 1,400 calories per pound, and somewhere in the mix of processed refined foods, 2,500 or so, 2,300 calories per pound. Nuts, 2,500 calories per pound, seeds, the same thing. And so having an understanding of calorie density scale will open your eyes to understanding the volume of food that needs to be consumed, right? So you can compare that to like one little chocolate bar, maybe hundreds of calories, 200 to 300, maybe over 300 calories in one little chocolate bar. But to get 300 calories of apples or something, you might be talking like 3, 4, 5 apples. Like that's a lot. And so you have to say, well, apples are pretty low on the calorie density scale. What I need is to consume more lentils, more garbanzo beans, more kidney beans, more brown rice, more oats, more potatoes, more sweet potatoes, more yams, more bulgur, more millet, these types of things. Maybe I need some nut butters in there as well. Maybe I need to have some fresh almonds, which I just ate a little bit ago, some walnuts, some hazelnuts, this kind of thing. I need to put, maybe I want to put flax seeds or chia seeds or hemp seeds on my oatmeal. Maybe I want to make a green smoothie and pack full of greens and fruits to make it really nutrient dense. But I want to put some white beans in there, some oats in there, or some peanut butter in there, and give it this kind of this calorie rich feel to it, and texture and density. And so that's the biggest thing, Luke. So what happens is people often switch from doesn't have to be standard American diet, but some sort of omnivorous diet, consuming a variety of animal and plant foods, and switch over to a completely plant-based diet. But what they often do is they don't replace those super calorie rich meat, milk, and eggs foods with foods that are of, as close to equivalent calorie density as possible. And so a typical equation so often happens. Let's say you're an athlete, pretty active, pretty good size, and muscle build and all that. Maybe you're consuming 3,500 calories a day. Easy to do. I do it pretty much every day of my life. Very easy to do. And that's a mixture of a lot of animal protein in there. And then you switch. Maybe a light bulb goes off. You tune into the Plant Fit Summit. You're like, man, that Robert Cheeke guy, I love that guy. I really resonated with his message. And I love the host, Luke Tan. He was absolutely incredible, just incredibly fit. I look at him on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. I see him doing all these things, the flagpole and everything. And they're inspired for some reason to adopt a plant-based diet. They eliminate the animal foods. And now that 3,500 calorie diet per day goes down to maybe 2,500. They lose 1,000 calories every single day, almost a third of their entire calorie intake, and wonder, why am I losing muscle? Why am I losing weight? A plant-based diet must not work. It has nothing to do with a plant-based diet not working. It has everything to do with calorie density and total calorie intake. You cannot, that's why a lot of these diets work in a temporary phase when you cut out all fat or you cut out all carbohydrates, and no one wants to cut out all protein. But when you cut out like a section of your macronutrient intake, or cut out all processed foods or whatever, that's why you're losing weight, because your calories have been completely reduced and shifted. It's not that you're eating, coconuts is the secret to weight loss, or eating an all potato diet is the secret, or having kale with every meal, including dessert, is the secret. That's not the secret. The secret is, what are your calorie needs, and what kind of calorie intake will put you in a surplus or deficit, combined with exercise, which will determine your results. And so that is all too common, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I think a lot of people don't understand calorie density, and they just give up. They say, you know what? This diet didn't work for me. New Year's resolutions typically end July 17th. July. Yeah, right. We wish. January 17th. And I'll say it again. New Year's resolutions end January 17th, the most common day. We give it 2.5 weeks. And that's it. We quit. We give up. But that could be any time of year. That could be right now, August, September, October, whenever we are inspired. But if we're not getting the required calories to maintain the muscle mass, you'd have to be pretty strong-willed to keep going in the face of, diminishing returns or perceived failure. So what we have to do, in summary, is understand the true calorie density and get those heavier foods into the diet. Simply, the rice and beans and oats and potatoes and nuts and nut butters, and a little bit higher intake of those, and you'll be fine. And document it in Chronometer or MyFitnessPal to be sure, because when we guess, we're wrong 99% of the time.
Moving away from calorie density, I think fitness enthusiasts always worry about macros. They always think, okay, I've been asked this many times. So what do your macros look like? Are you, 30% protein, 20% fat? So based on your research and your experience, what do macros look like if someone were to transition from kind of a high carnivorous diet to a plant-based diet?
Yeah, well, Luke, it's a good question, because what I think my answer is, my ideal ratio is not what I would recommend in that situation, because again, we don't want to go from one extreme to another. There has to be some sort of adaptation period. So, I think from my book, Shred It, that 70-15-15 is my approach. And in more realistic terms, recently documented, it was 70-20-10, or actually 70-10-20, 70% carbohydrate intake, 10% protein intake, 20% fat intake. And I think that's fantastic for athletes of all types. Even me as a strength guy, putting up some of my biggest lifts, constantly well over 200 pounds body weight, maintaining it, every day for years. It works for me. And I think it works for other people too. And in fact, even some other, big name bodybuilders have been giving a little bit lower protein intake a try. But if you're just coming off like a carnivore diet or an omnivorous diet that's pretty high in protein, I would say, there's got to be some sort of adaptation period where you adjust to a different way of eating, a different way of looking at food. And so in that regard, I would say maybe 20%, 25% of calories from protein, which is still double or 2.5 times what I personally intake and what I think is recommended based on just the real nutrition that comes from the other foods. And then, fill in the rest with, again, mostly carbohydrate and keeping fat to, 20 to 30%. So I guess that could would be like a, and I got to do some math here, like a 60-20-20, right? Yeah, like a 60% carbohydrate, or maybe some people a little bit lower, 50-25-25. I write about that in my new book, which is not out yet, of course, but I write about that for strength athletes and for those who are really kind of new to this and really embracing a plant-based diet, I think 50-25-25 is just more realistic. It's just a little more protein, a little more fat, and a little bit lower carbohydrate than what I think is recommended for most people. And, Luke, these days, doing this for so long, I don't worry about macro breakdowns. I'm also, to be fair, I'm also not competing. I retired from competitive bodybuilding about 10 years ago. I still stay in, pretty good shape from time to time. Train fairly regularly for the joy of it, for the fun of it. I'm 40 years old now. I'm getting older. I'm not competing. And so would my mindset be different? I think probably it would be. If I was competing, I'd be a little bit more nuanced and focused on the minutia and the real specifics and the details of, exactly how many grams of this and that. But right now I don't care. That's an added stress in my life that I don't need, or nor do I want. And I've lived by that philosophy for a long time. If I can throw that in here on this topic, because I think it's important too. I don't think we need to just stress or obsess about macronutrient breakdown, but what I think we need to do is just make the best use of the 1,440 minutes we have each day. Like, for example, I do 7 days a week of cardio right now. But you know what that is? That's like walking the dog and riding the bike while I watch, NBA basketball playoffs on television. I still do some when I go exercise for a proper workout, but there's other things, lifestyle things, going for a walk, with your children or with your spouse or with your friend or your family, or in my case, my wife and our dogs, every single day, and doing some form of exercise every single day, taking the stairs every given opportunity rather than an elevator, or going the extra mile by saying, I'm going to do something at the start of every morning to make sure I get it in every single day. Or I'm going to invest in a pair of dumbbells. And even if gyms are closed, which they are in many places around America right now with the coronavirus, I've got something I can do at home. Or I'm going to invest in some body weight exercises that I can, watch on YouTube and get an idea. To me, that is more important than a macronutrient breakdown. It's being active and eating healthy foods for the most part, even if it's not perfect, and a good amount of water intake. I think those things, and getting a good amount of sleep and keeping stress at a minimum. I think that's all much more important than how many grams of protein did I have today, after my workout that I mostly looked at my phone the whole time, and instead of having a mind-muscle connection and being present in the gym or my workout, I was just scrolling on social media instead, which is going on in 99% of gyms right now. So I'm much more of a big picture. We talked even off camera about that too. We're both like a big picture approach. We could, we could talk about endothelial cells and the Krebs cycle and ATP transport, but I'm probably going to screw it up. I'll miss a few points in there because to me, it's the everyday things, and that determines who we are. Also, that determines whether we're in good shape, or whether we're overweight, or whether whether we have an ongoing bad or good habit. It's the things we do every day. It's everyday things that make the sum of our outcome. And that's what I think is much more important. So focus more on fresh air, smiling, drinking a lot of water, good complex carbohydrates, whole plant foods, exercise, and don't worry as much about the macronutrient breakdown unless you're, a serious competitor in a sport that requires you to pay attention to that, like the sport of bodybuilding. Otherwise, even Olympic athletes I've talked with, they don't count that stuff. They're just grateful for another day to go train and exercise and be healthy and injury free and able to do the sport they love.
I love it. Taking a holistic approach, not just at food, but at life in general. And I resonate with that as well, because I'm 41 and I'm talking about, joint health, joint mobility, morning rituals, waking up at 4:30 a.m., thinking about how I can keep up with my daughter. She sprints ahead and how I can keep up with her. Just to kind of tie this protein topic up in terms of amino acids, for those that don't understand, what are amino acids as a big picture view. And I know there is also discussion about plant proteins being incomplete. So maybe you could expand on the complete versus incomplete so we can kind of tie a loop around this protein and just kind of shift it out of the way.
Yeah, so amino acids are the building blocks of protein. They come in either essential and non-essential. Obviously, essential meaning, we need to get them from our diet. Non-essential, our body makes them. So the essential amino acids we've got to get from our food, right? And they are available in all plant-based foods. And there might be some that are higher in some foods than others. Like, I don't know, let's say tryptophan, I think is, it's high, maybe higher in hemp seeds than it is in peas or something like that. And so, as you consume a wide variety of food throughout the day, the body uses all these different amino acid levels that we're getting from all types of foods. And that's how we make our complete protein. For one, some plants are complete protein just as is, but that's not the thing that's important. What's important is the combination, the collection of amino acids that are consumed throughout the day, that are just, around in the body, that the body uses when they need them to bring them together and form that complete protein to help do things like repair muscle tissue and balance hormones and strengthen our immune system and assist in all kinds of other body functions, mostly growth and repair. And so all we have to do is just be aware of any kind of even mild diversity in our diet. Obviously things like soybeans and other foods are very high in protein, some of the highest out there in the plant-based kingdom. And so you're going to get just a more, I guess if you want to say complete level or higher level of diverse essential amino acid intake from particular foods like that. And a few others might stand out. Peas obviously stand out. If you look at most plant proteins, as far as supplement form, many of them are soy, pea, hemp, rice based, a few other things as well, perhaps alfalfa or something else. But really, we can just eat these foods, and also we have to just be logically aware as well. Like if we're questioning, can vegans or vegan athletes or people on a plant-based diet get complete protein, yet they are winning Olympic medals, they're playing in the NFL, they're playing in the NBA, they're winning powerlifting competitions, they're winning CrossFit competitions, they're some of the greatest runners the world has ever known. They are some of the most fantastic Olympic champions we've ever seen, like Carl Lewis and others, who are the biggest, fastest, strongest on the planet. We can't logically make that argument. Then you just look at it from a nutrition perspective, and those who know a whole lot more than me, people like Brenda Davis and Juliana Hever, people who are registered dietitians, could tell you like the breakdown of it, or doctors like Dr. Michael Clapper, Michael Greger, could walk us down that pathway a little bit better than I can. But what I can tell you is that essential amino acids that need to come from our diet are easy to get on a plant-based diet by eating a variety of foods. And they work in the body in a holistic way, in a synergistic way, or harmonious way, as Dr. T. Colin Campbell says, where the body uses them when they need them. And so we pool all these amino acids and to be used whenever we need them for repair, or need them for other types of transport or hormone production, or whatever the case is. And so it's, to me, that's absolutely nothing to worry about. I know obviously there have been books and other things that have perpetuated this idea dating back to the 1970s that plant proteins were incomplete, but that incomplete protein nonsense is complete BS. So, and that just takes any logical person to be able to figure that out. That you look at the biggest, strongest mammals, walking the planet, the elephants, the rhinos, hippos, whatever. They're bison. They're the biggest, strongest animals out there are plant-based, and many of the biggest, strongest humans now are plant-based as well, because we've discovered that we can often increase and improve our energy, our stamina, improve our recovery by reducing inflammation, and increase our longevity by not having plaque buildup and damaging the endothelial cells that line our arteries that lead to heart disease, heart attack, stroke, and other cardiac issues. We can avoid that stuff simply by eating what some used to describe was an incomplete diet, which it turns out to be. It's as complete nutritionally as you can possibly get. Essentially, it is everything that we need without the things that we don't need, without the dietary cholesterol that we don't need, with all kinds of fiber, which we do need, with 64 times more antioxidants coming from plants than in animal foods that we need to fight off free radicals and reduce inflammation and improve our health, improve our biomarkers. It's without the harm to the animals, without the harm to the planet, having a lighter footprint, creating a kinder, gentler world, not relying on fast food and government subsidies to pay for the slaughtering of innocent animals that unfortunately were only bred to be eaten by people who then become almost always times, not just often, but almost always they become sick, diseased, obese, overweight, and develop some of the worst things that could ever be inflicted on any of us, which is something like cancer, which in many cases can be prevented. We know that now from research studies that certain foods, processed meats, red meats, and other activities, smoking and other things, will increase the likelihood of developing cancer. Whereas on the flip side, eating not just a whole bunch of plants and plant foods, but avoiding those other things like red meat and casein protein and whey protein will actually help prevent cancer. And so that is the total picture when it comes to amino acids. No need to specifically combine rice and beans in a meal, although it makes for a pretty good burrito or burrito bowl. It's kind of, it almost feels weird one without the other. They seem to go well together, but you certainly don't have to. It just, the food you eat throughout the day, as long as you get the requisite calories that your body needs, the body is so smart, so sophisticated that it will do the rest for you.
I want to go into transitioning as well. For people that are moving towards transitioning, or people who are in the fitness industry wanting to transition to this lifestyle. And I know of some people that have really excelled. Like I know of a lot of the athletes that you mentioned, and Dot Seabao, she's a mutual friend of ours. Many of the athletes on the Game Changers as well, and even within Vegan Strong and Plant Build and all these other athletes. There are athletes that are doing really well, but there are also some people that kind of fall short of their athletic goals, whether it's subpar recovery, lethargy, lack of energy. Why do some people actually fall short of these benefits of going plant-based? I know calorie density was one topic, a key one, consuming sufficient calories. Are there any other reasons why people might fall short of these benefits of being plant-based?
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. And one of those is something we haven't necessarily talked about yet, and that's nutrient density. So there's a lot of different ways to eat a plant-based diet or a vegan diet. And, I'm not going to say that cliche term that everyone says that just because it's vegan, means it's good for you, or just because you're vegan means you're healthy. I'm not going to say that. But what I'm going to say is that there's different levels of nutrient density that we need to be aware of. And many of us are guilty of consuming a lot of processed foods because we like the way they taste or feel, or they're comforting, or they're just part of our culture. We really like things like pizza or lasagna or pad thai covered in oil and all these other things. There's nothing wrong with that, unless that's all you eat. So if you come from a, whatever, animal-based diet, and you were eating, a variety of different things, and you switch over to plant-based diet, and now your refined carbohydrate intake is through the roof because you're trying to find some calorie-rich foods. And so, like, you've heard the thing, people eat like a gallon of ice cream to put on weight. I mean, just some sort of ridiculous things. But people do this in real life. And they say, I wonder why a plant-based diet didn't work for me. Well, were you eating blueberries? And were you eating cherries? Were you eating lentils and pinto and black beans and wild rice and squash and oats and barley and things like that? Or were you eating like, frozen burritos and breakfast pastries and soda and sugary drinks and, very active lifestyle and eating all this stuff that's not real food? So that's another thing where people can, go a little bit astray, or the plan goes awry when the nutrient density isn't there. And so I think the way around that is to ensure there is a whole food consumption throughout the day. And here's the way to do that. Okay. For everyone listening, here's what you do. So what I want you to do is write on a piece of paper, like these different categories: fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds. And I want you to think of your 5 favorite, every category, your 5 favorite fruits, your 5 favorite vegetables, your 5 favorite grains, favorite legumes, favorite nuts, favorite seeds. And when you do that, you identify these foods that you like. And then you need to go out and actually make sure those are available. Make sure that you have them in your home. So what if, Luke, all your favorite fruits are seasonal in the summer? Let's say you only like peaches, nectarines, cherries, blueberries, strawberries. But when it comes to the other, depending on where you live, 9 months of the year where it's not summer, right? You don't have those. And let's say you don't eat frozen fruit because that's just not your thing. You don't like smoothies, or you want fresh. So now all of a sudden you cut out, or you've eliminated all of your favorite foods from an entire category, right? And the same could be for any other category. Like vegetables are the one that's most likely missed by most people, because we would much rather, really, like many of us would much rather have vegan chicken nuggets than to have romaine lettuce and kale and Swiss chard. Just one tastes way better. It's more filling. It's covered in oil. And so it's like, it creates these senses that we crave it. And it's filling because it's full with hundreds of calories, if not thousands. And we like the taste. We like the taste of a vegan chicken, maybe even with some sauce or dipping sauce or something, rather than eating vegetables. So the way around that is simply to identify your favorite foods, make sure they're available, make sure you have them accessible. And if that is too limiting for you, make a list of 10, in case you're like, man, I've already had apples, bananas, oranges, blueberries, and grapefruit. Like rattle them off. You might get tired of eating the same 5 fruits. But we're talking about, you talked about like Dr. Will B in his book Fiber Fueled, about eating 40 different plants per week, 40 or 50 maybe, 50 plants per week. What that means is we've got to diversify a little bit. And so I think that's the problem. I kind of know what you're talking about. You and I have been in this arena for a long time now. We see some people who've come to the vegan lifestyle, some athletes, didn't work for them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's diet, sometimes it's nutrient density. Other times maybe it wasn't all that high of a priority. The reasoning was maybe not in the right place. It was maybe not even from a health or environmental or animal rights standpoint, but from some other perspective that they came to it, and it was destined to fail from the get-go. It could be lack of support network. It could be lack of family support or environmental support, meaning the people around you. If you're the only player on your entire team and you get teased every single day, sometimes it's hard to stick with it, even if you care about it. If you're traveling for your sport and you're on tour all the time, and your whole team is going to fast food restaurants and family sit down restaurants, and you're stuck sitting on the bus eating your own, salad you brought, yeah, it can be tough. But I think at the end of the day, for most people, to answer your question the best that I can, for most people, I think it's really a nutrient density thing. Whereas I said at the very beginning, we are over consuming but under nourishing ourselves. And I think if we can just nourish ourselves properly and as transparently and consistently as possible, then we put ourselves in a position to be successful. And maybe we won't have those outcomes of where we quit or give up, because we'll feel better, we'll have better results, we'll have less pain, more energy, more joy, better sleep, better digestion, better skin, whatever the case is. These aren't all guarantees, but they're very likely to see improvement if we improve our diet.
I've been following you from the early days of vegan bodybuilding and fitness. And for me as well, you've been a mentor and friend of mine for all these years. You talk about goals, you set goals, and I've seen the pictures of you next to Arnold back in your vegan bodybuilding and fitness days. And I want to go into goals right now because you're always moving forwards. You're always kind of pushing new boundaries. And you've written, what, 4 books now? Is it?
Yeah, I got a 5th one coming out soon.
Yeah, exactly. 5 books. The 5th book that's coming out, which is incredible. I can't wait to read it. And yeah, I guess for people out there, especially with all that's happening right now, people are a little bit jaded. What would you share to them to set some goals that are meaningful and purpose-driven?
I love this topic. So, I could go on and on about this. We would go well into the night. The Zoom would shut off. It'd be too long. But one thing that comes to mind recently, because I was just interviewing him a while back for my new book, The Plant-Based Athlete, comes out next year, is John Joseph and his obsession with positive mental attitude. And he's been through a lot of rough stuff. He's been shot, he's been stabbed, he's witnessed people getting murdered. He was living on the streets. He served time in jail. He's had a rough life in a lot of ways, foster homes and all these things. But he always maintained a positive mental attitude because that was the way to escape from the pain, from the fear, from the worry, from the hurt, from the reality. Was if you were just unmistakably positive and you carry that throughout your demeanor and you engage in, things like he does, like feeding the homeless. And that's not for a pat on the back for him. It's because that's where he feels alive. Like he is coming alive because he's of service. He's giving to others. And so I think what we have to do, it's been said many times in many ways by a lot of different people. In fact, you just kind of even suggested it to it. We've got to find a real purpose and a reason for what we're doing. For me, when I became vegan in 1995, it wasn't to be some sort of magazine cover bodybuilder someday. That happened, but that happened as a result of me wanting to make a difference in the world around me. I grew up on a farm. I used to even sell animals at the auction that would later, my own pets, pet cows, pet chickens, pet rabbits that would go and be sold and turn into someone's food. I was doing that. When I made that connection at age 15, I said, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to cause harm to animals, especially those that I've cared for and have trusted me to take care of them. I've broken that trust. I've betrayed them. And not only that, their life is now over. And they're going to be on some kid's plate who doesn't make the connection at all, And so I found meaning in what I was doing. And at the same time, I grew up in the 80s, like you. I wanted to be bigger and stronger. I was a small kid. I mean, I was in 8th grade. I still have the health card. It's fun to still have it. 8th grade, which would have been 1994, 14 years old, I weighed 89.25 pounds. I still have it. And I was about 105 pounds, at some point in my freshman year when I played basketball for the high school team. I was a small kid. I wanted to get bigger and stronger for my own reasons. Like a lot of people got tired of being pushed around a little bit and knocked around. And I was easy to pick on a little bit if people wanted to kind of punch me or something, because I wouldn't be able to do a whole lot back. But I also was fascinated by sports. I really was. I was a sports fan from the moment I can remember. And I didn't even have cable television growing up. I had to wait to the weekends to try to watch a basketball game or anything I could and play sports with my siblings. I wanted to get bigger and stronger for my own reasons, things that were meaningful to me. I grew up with role models, and even if they seem silly, even in cartoon form, like He-Man and Captain Planet. Here's this muscular guy, Captain Planet trying to save the world, through air, water, fire, earth, like recycling, like doing all this fun stuff. That really resonated with me. And so I set out to do that. And part of the reason, Luke, and I think you know this, was that I thought, this is in the 1990s, no internet, or at least internet was brand new for some people. And I thought, and this is the truth, I thought that if I can do this, if I can build muscle on a vegan diet, and that will make a difference for animals, maybe that will inspire other people that they can believe in themselves to do the same. And that was my goal. Like, if I can do it, what might happen? What if? And so I worked at it. I understood even back then that we had 1,440 minutes in a day, and you got to make the most of it. And you want it to be happy, and you want it to be enjoyable and fulfilling and rewarding. And so I would do things like push-ups every day and crunches every day and ride my bike and run and play soccer on the farm and do stuff that would help me get closer to where I wanted to be. And the most important thing, Luke, and I don't know where this comes from, I just had it within me, but I think it can be learned also, is that I was always able to connect the dots ahead of time. I always knew that the workout I do today is going to serve me 5 years from now or 10 years from now because of the patterns and habits it's going to create within me. And that was the same with writing a book. A lot of people would have said I had no business in the sport of bodybuilding. I went on to, as you said, be kind of the godfather of vegan bodybuilding and win multiple competitions and create a website now almost 20 years ago, veganbodybuilding.com, and be in magazines and television and documentaries and newspapers and all that, because there weren't a lot of people doing it. But I played that role, and it was for a purpose. And people said I had no business being there, but I worked at it and I worked at it and I worked at it. Same with being an author, Luke. I no business doing it. I don't have an education in journalism or English literature or writing. It was just something I worked at because I wanted to be a writer since I was 8 years old. And I just kept writing. And I knew the writing I do today, and I'm talking even as a teenager, I wrote like a 100-page book as a teenager. I spent my recess with a teacher, instead of going off to lunch and hanging out with high school friends and all that fun stuff, I would meet with a writing teacher and work on something that would lead me to today. And I realized that, and I self-published a book, and I toured all over, including hanging out with you in Australia, multiple years in Australia. Actually, yeah, 2 years in a row, I saw you in Melbourne. And I self-published another book, and then another book, and then another book. And then I landed a publishing deal with the second largest publisher in the world, and even turned down an offer from the largest publisher in the world. And now a new book, The Plant-Based Athlete, is going to come out next year, and it's going to change my whole life. And it's going to change the life of a lot of people who read it, because it's going to be in every bookstore in America and then eventually in countries around the world. It's going to be hardcover. It's going to be a big deal. And it's going to look like an overnight success. Who's this Robert Cheeke guy who doesn't even have that many Instagram followers or that much of it's not even on YouTube. But it's 25 years of me saying, I'm going to make the most of this day. And that is going to make a difference tomorrow. So that's the message I want to tell people. And one real practical thing I want to say is that this applies to working out, and it applies to writing books. It applies to doing anything you want to do in business, in life. And I don't mean to make it lighthearted when I say it applies to anything, but I think you'll get my point. I was meeting with a university president back in Portland, Oregon, many years ago, probably 12 years ago at this point. And I was telling him that I wanted to be an author. I'm going to be an author someday. I was telling him, full of confidence, right? I'm in my 20s. I'm just full of confidence. I'm going to be an author someday. You watch. And he said, so how's it going so far? I said, well, it's coming along. I've had some projects that didn't quite work out, or got turned down by publishers. Or he said, so what are you doing every day to fix that? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, Robert, I want you to write 2 pages every day. I don't care if it's terrible, the worst writing you've ever done in your life. I want you to write 2 pages every day. And soon you've written a book. And that stuck with me. And so I went home and I wrote, but not just 2 pages. Some days I would write 20 pages in a single day. But the idea was that I would write every single day. And I carried that over. I think you might know this. I once did over 100 push-ups and over 100 crunches for 839 consecutive days. Never missed a day. Even when I was flying to Australia, I did them at the airport in Los Angeles, and I did them in Sydney when I landed. And that wasn't to build my chest or build my abs. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with building patterns and habits and consistent behavior that I knew would carry me into other areas of life. And so when I say write 2 pages every day and soon you have a book, I took that to heart, and now I have 5 books and one that's going to change my life forever when it comes out soon. And I applied that to fitness as well, in areas I had no business being in. Even when I retired from bodybuilding, I went back into running, I think you know. I dropped 30 pounds, and I finished in the top 5 in every race that I did because I worked at it. I put in the work. And that's really what I want to communicate with people. You got to find what's here. You know, what do you love to do? What makes you excited? What do you want to do? And what do you do when it's your choice, when you're not at work or you're not at school or you're not, doing your typical obligations, but what do you spend your spare time doing? What do you make time for? Like, what do you go out of your way to do or consume or practice? And when you can identify those things and find some that are healthy behaviors, I'm not just talking about like watching a bunch of television on your downtime, and that can be okay too if that's a goal in life, or surfing the internet. And again, nothing wrong with that if that's a goal, or playing video games. But I'm talking if the goal is health and fitness, find what resonates with you and say, this action is going to be my 2 pages every day. That could be muscle ups, that could be push-ups, that could be going for a morning walk, that could be going for a run. I mean, I know your wife runs marathons and all this kind of stuff. She must have some sort of something that gets her excited every day. I know you have a great work ethic with your training. There must be something inside of you. And so for those who are still trying to find their way in health and fitness and wanting to make a difference in their own lives and in the lives of those around them, that's what I say. Make the most out of every day and really mean it, and find that positive mental attitude and be of service to others and help encourage others along the way, and make sure this is never a competition, me against you. It's always me against me, and me, lifting you up to the best of my ability, and you lifting me up. It's not just me looking down to lift somebody up. It's reaching down and helping somebody up, and knowing that I'm going to need to be helped up, myself sometimes. So that's what I say. My tagline: follow your passion and make it happen. So that's what I think is going to make a difference in people's health and fitness. When you discover, if it's not your passion, at least what tugs at your heart, at least what makes you happy, and do that as often as possible, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
I love it, Robert, and I resonate with that so much because it's all about showing up, isn't it? Whether you like it or not, showing up. But in order to show up, it needs to come from the heart. And I look at my own journey from discarding a kilo of meat overnight after watching Earthlings to where I am right now, the summit, speaking to the rock stars of the plant-based movement from my seat in Singapore. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that just that act of throwing away my meat and just saying, I'm just going to go vegan, I'm not sure what's going to happen, what brought us here, and really grow this friendship of ours from a distance. And also for me, I just find it grateful and honored. I'm extremely honored to be able to share this message, share your passion and the passions of all the experts in the world to get people living a little bit happier and healthier. So I would say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your friendship and inspiration from the start. I always, every interview and podcast episode that I do, they always ask me about my plant-based vegan journey. They always ask me how it started. So the first story was Earthlings. The second story was getting the vegan bodybuilding and fitness book from my wife, Emily. So it's come full circle. So thank you for being a part of my summit, our summit. I think many people are going to draw a lot of inspiration from you, from our chat. And I hope this will be the push that they need to start 2021 with all guns blazing for a better world.
Well, thank you, Luke. It's been an absolute honor, and it's been great getting to know you and your family. And you're right, this lifestyle, a decision we made, for you from watching a film, for me from being inspired by my older sister and listening to some speakers in a high school in the mid-90s that changed my life forever, have led me to some of the greatest people I've ever known, some of my best friends, worldwide travel. I I always hoped that I would do, but never knew that I would, but wanted to, and now have done. And being able to fulfill all those dreams of making a difference for animals, making a difference in my own life, as far as being able to build muscle like I always wanted, be able to write books like I wanted from when I was a kid. I wouldn't have been able to do that without a plant-based diet and vegan lifestyle, because of the opportunities that those provided. To be able to speak on this subject and talk about it and tour with Vegan Strong and with vegan bodybuilding and with friends and colleagues who are like family to me, and to the health and longevity and things that a plant-based diet has provided for me, and the unique opportunities to be part of an event like this. So Luke, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for inviting me, for sharing your story, and for sharing your kind words with me today, and for thinking of me too, even after years of me sometimes not being available or dealing with my own issues that we all have to deal with, of anxiety or not wanting to be on camera, and going different directions. I'm honored to be back on the summit, and I surely hope that people did get a little bit out of this conversation, and it was an absolute pleasure and honor to speak with you today.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.